Welcome to Maulana Azad National Urdu University Distance Education Program for the postgraduate students. Today we are going to discuss the play Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. First of all, let us discuss about our reactions to the play when we read it. Have you read the play? How did you feel about it? My own reaction when I first read the play was it's all nonsense. It might be because the language English is not my mother tongue, and I suppose it is not the mother tongue of most of you, but then it does not come in the way of appreciating the other plays. Waiting for Godot is a special case, right? Interestingly, the reaction of the first audience of Waiting for Godot was very similar to mine when it was first produced in 1955 on English stage. It has frustrated the expectations of the audience then, who were used to a different kind of convention. Like any path-breaking experiment, initially it is difficult to understand this, but then there are some aids to understanding the play. If we know the historical background and the convention to which it belongs and the European and English theatre traditions, probably will be able to appreciate the play more. And while appreciating the play, we can also understand ourselves and our relationship with the society around us. Isn't it the hallmark of all great literature? Samuel Beckett, who is the writer of Waiting for Godot, is of Irish origin and migrated to France. He usually wrote his works in French and then translated them into English. His other works include Endgame, Happy Days, Breath, etc. And he wrote a lot of novels as well and poetry. He received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1969. The play Waiting for Godot was written in French in 1952, and it was first translated into English and performed in 1955. August 1955 to be exact. And in spite of the initial reaction of bafflement by the reviewers and the audience, it has come to influence major English dramatists like Harold Pinter. Let us first understand what the play is all about. If you have read the play, you would know that there are only 5 characters in the play. There are 2 tramps, Vladimir, also addressed as Didi, Estragon, also addressed as Gogo, and Pozzo, Lucky, and a boy. The story involves these characters in a very simple and austere setting. It is a country road and very barren, with only a tree as a background, a tree without leaves in the first act and with only a few leaves in the second act. In this austere setting, you find 2 tramps, Vladimir and Estragon, waiting for a certain unknown person called Godot. And there is no other action in the play, unless you think that waiting itself is an action. And Pozzo and Lucky pass by. It is another interesting pair in the play. Pozzo is apparently a landlord, very egoistic landlord, who is on his way to sell his servant Lucky. Lucky is more a slave than a servant. He is more like an automaton and obeys in toto all the orders of Pozzo. Even his thinking is controlled by Pozzo. And during this waiting of the two tramps, the arrival of Pozo and Lucky is a welcome diversion for the tramps. And the other character, Boy, and we are not very sure whether it is the same boy who makes a brief entry in the first act and also makes a second entry in the second act. The boy is a messenger from Godot, briefly entering to inform the tramps that Godot has postponed his appointment to the following day. Nothing else happens in the play in terms of action. One of the reviewers of the first production of Waiting for Godot commented, "Nothing happens twice, that is in both the acts." Needless to say, Godot himself never appears in the play, and the audience of the first production of Waiting for Godot were quite restless that nothing happens in the play, and the play itself is very self-conscious about nothing happening in the play. Vladimir comments, "Nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes, it is awful." As students of literature, we not only enjoy the story and the action of a movie or a television play or a play in theatre, we also pay attention to how the drama is made enjoyable. What are the elements that went into it to make it enjoyable? The dialogue, the development of the plot, the evolution of the characters, all these various elements that you have to notice and study and arrive at an understanding as to how the play creates the impact that it has created. In the first half of the 20th century, the influence of George Bernard Shaw on British theatre was predominant. George Bernard Shaw brought realism to British theatre. You might have read George Bernard Shaw's plays like Pygmalion, Arms and the Man, Major Barbara. Even if some of the issues that he addressed in his plays are outdated and may not be very relevant to our own social context, it is still possible to appreciate his plays basically because of the conventional structure of his plays with whom we are very familiar. And if we compare this to Waiting for Godot, we miss that familiar structure. We find the absence of the familiar elements like story, plot. The characters are not specific and particular. There is no visible conflict, and there is certainly no resolution of the conflict in the end. And as I told you, if at all there is some action, it is only the waiting. The characters, we do not know about them, which nationality they belong to, which province, what is their social background, what is their education. It is all left to the speculation and interpretation, just like the substance of the play. And everything is vague and uncertain about the play. But then how do you understand such a play? Where do we locate it to be able to make sense out of it? The stage setting is uniquely austere. There are not many props. The protagonists are tramps They don't even belong to the middle class apparently. The language and linguistic devices used in the play are very different from the earlier plays and the well-made play convention. The linguistic devices like the speech pace, pauses, silences, etc. And you find, if you are familiar with the English cultural scenario of the time, the play also incorporates elements from mime, music hall, circus and stylized movements. And we find that the conventional plot is missing from this play. Just like in the well-made play, the structure is symmetrical and the plot is constantly developing. We find the opposite, the reverse in this play, where you find a static plot and asymmetrical structure, and the action is very, very static. For example, Estragon says, "Well, shall we go?" Vladimir agrees, "Yes, let us go." They do not move. Such is the static nature of the action. Now, what do you make out of this play? I think we need to understand the tradition to which it belongs, or the tradition which it has started. Waiting for Godot belongs to the theatre of the absurd. I hope you have heard about this school of theatre, which is known by the label of absurdism. You find plays of Eugene Ionesco, Jean Genet, Arthur Adamov, and the earlier plays of the American playwright Edward Albee. All these playwrights who are labeled under the theatre of the absurd practice certain attitudes, they betray certain attitudes in the plays which are summarized in the essay of Albert Camus called The Myth of Sisyphus. In Camus' words, a world that can be explained even with bad reasons is a familiar world, but on the other hand, in a universe suddenly divested of illusions and lights, man feels an alien, a stranger. His exile is without remedy, since he is deprived of the memory of a lost home or the hope of a promised land. This divorce between man and his life, the actor and his setting, is properly the feeling of absurdity. It is the futile action that describes the human condition, the universal human condition, according to the perspective of the theatre of the absurd. Have you ever felt this kind of feeling of meaninglessness, senselessness of time, a fleeting moment when a thought about life and death set you thinking about the purpose of life, why you have been born and why you are going to die without your own volition? Have you ever felt this even for an instant? Probably in some moments of depression, we all felt this. The absurd drama tries to capture this feeling. It captures this feeling and doesn't discuss it in intellectual terms. It is possible to analyze this issue within a conventional framework, but the absurdist drama doesn't discuss it in intellectual terms, but instead attempts to convey the sense of the absurdity through its form itself. You find while making sense out of the play that there is a sense of uncertainty pervading throughout the play. Vladimir and Estragon are not very sure about the arrival of Godot. They don't even know whether he will arrive at the appointed time. They are not even sure about the venue for their rendezvous. Estragon despairingly says, "Oh, you are sure it was here? What? That we were to wait?" He sat by the tree. They look at the tree. "Do you see any others?" And later during the play, Vladimir says, referring to Godot's promise, he didn't say for sure he would come. They were not even sure about the time when Godot would come, whether it's Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. This continues into the Act 2 when Estragon is uncertain whether he had come to this location the previous day or this is the first time. They are uncertain about the testimonies of the apostles of Christ. Even the identity of Godot is utterly unclear. Some critics were tempted to equate Godot with God. Of course, Samuel Beckett was quick to correct their perception, but if we follow the adage, trust the tale and not the teller, we are at liberty to interpret it in theological terms. I would like you to study Lucky's bizarre speech carefully. At a first appearance, it doesn't make any sense. Probably all the meaning that we ascribe to it is our own speculation and interpretation and may not be meant by the playwright at all. You find in Lucky's speech the influence of James Joyce's technique of stream of consciousness, where profound abstractions are placed in a meaningless syntax. But at the same time, it is also possible to interpret Lucky's speech as a mockery of the playwright at the senselessness of these profundities, especially when uttered by Lucky. The contrast of these concepts, the philosophical concepts, the abstractions, the profundities, and Lucky's own suffering, it makes it very pathetic. The whole scenario, the spectacle becomes suddenly pathetic. In the face of abject poverty and brutal genocide, how do these matter? In the suffering of Lucky, how do they make any impact? Typically, the absurdist playwrights suspect the concepts of reason, rationality, faith in inevitable human progress, because the reality after the First and Second World Wars brought a profound disillusionment about the human being among them. You might ask, if these people are so obsessed with the purposelessness or meaninglessness of life, why do they write at all? Why do they write about this purposelessness at all? The critics like Eric Bentley suggest that the writing itself is a way for the playwrights to transcend the despair. I suggest that the play itself provides a clue as to why these playwrights write at all about the despair. Just like Vladimir and Estragon invent different plays within the play to pass the time, it is a play by the playwright in more than one sense. This could be one interpretation. Can't we argue in this direction? This brings us to another dimension from which we can look at the play. We've mentioned Camus' description of absurdity. Camus belongs to an existentialist tradition of which Sartre was one of the major exponents. It was often said that Samuel Beckett's Godot is an existentialist text. Sartre says, our life is only a long waiting, first a waiting for the realization of our ends and especially a waiting for ourselves. These waitings evidently all include a reference to a final term which would be waited for without waiting for anything more. The whole series is suspended from this final term, which on principle is never given and which is the value of our being. There are a number of instances in the play where you find these existentialist expressions. Like for instance, Vladimir says, the essential doesn't change, Estragon, nothing to be done. And at another point, Estragon says, we always find something, Didi, to give us the impression we exist. Look at this expression of Vladimir. And we are blessed in this, that we happen to know the answer. Yes, in this immense confusion, one thing alone is clear. We are waiting for Godot to come. In fact, if you follow the existentialist point of view, you find that Vladimir and Estragon are exhibiting bad faith by their hope for Godot to come. They are inventing a purpose for their living. They are inventing a purpose which is non-existent and not given. We have seen the play from the point of view of the tradition of the theatre of the absurd and the existential philosophy. I hope you will read more about these concepts while trying to understand the play. Let us now try to know about the historical background of the play, which has given rise to this kind of expression. In the 20th century especially, the religious faith was on wane, and even the faith in social progress, the liberal faith in social progress, was badly affected after the First World War itself and took further beating after the Second World War. And the intelligentsia of the world became disillusioned with the radical social revolution which happened during the October Revolution in the Soviet Union. Because of the totalitarian tyranny in Soviet Union, There was a relapse into barbarism in Hitler's regime during the Second World War. There was a spread of spiritual emptiness in Western Europe and the United States. Colin Duckworth says, I quote, "At the time in Western Europe, generally there was a strong feeling of post-war disillusion. The age of heroes and of action for good causes had temporarily gone. Perhaps an increasing number of intelligent young people felt the need to ponder about the ultimate questions posed by existence." Let us look at the response of some of the critics on this play, so that we will be reassured in our efforts to understanding the play. If we are baffled by the play, we will be reassured that it equally baffled the academics and the critics. Michael Collins, for instance, says, Godot simultaneously demands that we interpret it and eludes all our efforts to do so. William Hutchings says, disconcerting uncertainty about the meaning of the play is a crucial part of the experience of waiting for Godot and any discussion of it. So, the pervading sense of uncertainty that we find uncomfortable is exactly the meaning of the play, so to speak. That is the kind of sense of uncertainty that the play is trying to convey. I wish you a happy reading of the play, and I suppose this kind of background information would assist you in understanding the play better and in understanding yourself. If you have any queries, write to the director, Directorate of Distance Education, Maulana Azad National Urdu University, Gachibowli, Hyderabad 500032. We will meet in the next program. Till then, goodbye.